Am I, as some have suggested, a moderate and not a conservative? Do you have to hold the same views as the vocal right wing in order to actually be conservative? Well, let's take a look at that for a moment, shall we? I've been getting this a lot lately. People saying that maybe I'm not really a conservative, I'm really a moderate, as though that actually changes anything. It's usually said by people on the far left who kind of have a vested hatred of the word conservative, and therefore anything they can do to stop someone from using that word, it's kind of seen as a small victory. It's like the religious zealots who think that if they stop you from calling yourself an atheist and start being an agnostic, somehow they've won. Never mind that your actual views haven't changed, it's just the terminology that counts. But in this case, I really don't think that it does. Now, depending on who you ask, political moderates are those in the middle of the political spectrum, those who have some views on the traditional left and some views on the traditional right. People who don't share in the extremes of either side. And I guess by that definition, I am a moderate, and so are the overwhelming majority of other people. Outside of the fanatics, most people have a wide range of political and social views that are really not easy to categorize because they don't fall under any one traditional political umbrella. That makes the term ultimately useless because it describes virtually everyone on the planet. To be honest, I really stopped caring about terminology a long time ago. This isn't some kind of childish tribalism. This is describing your general political views in a few short words that would otherwise take hours to explain in detail. That's really all these labels are. What my conservatism is, that's probably not shared by most other conservatives and vice versa. And the same goes for liberalism and for libertarians and pretty much every other group around the world. Just because I say I'm a conservative doesn't mean that I'm exactly the same as other people who likewise call themselves conservatives. It isn't the exact positions that matter so much as the underlying rationale for why we hold those positions. That's why I'm a conservative, because I use conservative principles to determine my own individual stances. Now, as anyone knows who's watched any of my political videos, and I know they're not that popular around here, but hey, my channel, my show, I view conservatism simplistically as having 4 pillars: personal responsibility, fiscal responsibility, small government, and keeping the government the hell out of the lives of the citizenry as much as humanly possible. Anything that fits those criteria, as far as I'm concerned, is a relatively solid conservative value. And because I'm not religious, all of the things on the far conservative right that are based entirely on religion, or on emotion for that matter, I reject. That means things like abortion and equal rights, things that a lot of the extremists in the GOP hate, I'm entirely fine with. It isn't because they are so-called liberal values, it's because they're actually conservative ones. They mesh just fine with the pillars of conservatism that I hold dear. And I know I talk about abortion a fair bit, but I really find that to be a very interesting subject. There isn't a single person that I have ever talked to who opposes abortion who doesn't do so for either religious or emotional reasons. Not one. If there is, I'd love to talk to them because I have never run into anyone who did. And that makes the topic interesting to me, not because I particularly care about abortion, but I do care about people who can't step back from their emotional views and examine things intellectually. I expect people to be rational, and when they're not, I have a serious problem with that. Anyhow, before I go too far off topic, what I really wanted to say is that all of my decisions come from my conservatism. I don't just pick and choose which values I want to hold. There is an underlying rationale for why I make the decisions that I do, and I figure that everyone ought to operate that way. You shouldn't hold a political or a religious or a social position just because it makes you feel good, but because you've come to your decision intellectually and it fits into an overall consistent framework that makes rational sense. There needs to be an intellectual thread running through your entire range of positions such that they all hang together, and if there isn't, then there is something seriously wrong with your mental processes. I guess that's really the one thing that bothers me the most about so many people that I talk to. They have never bothered to think about why they believe the things that they do, politically, religiously, or otherwise. They just believe. They've been told that they should by friends or family or authority figures, but they've never stopped to think about why they believe these things, why they should, if they should. And that's why this country is so screwed up, because nobody actually reasons their way through their beliefs. They feel their way. Feelings don't actually get you anywhere worthwhile, no matter what you wish was the case. The reality is, to bring this back to conservatism, that you can't really spend more money than you have. Not over the long term, but nobody wants to hear that. They don't know how to be fiscally responsible. They don't want to be accountable. They want to be able to spend money because it feels good to spend money, but they don't want to have to think about where the money comes from. Because for far too many people, it just doesn't matter. That's why, as a nation, we're $21 trillion in debt. It's why people in their personal lives are buried in credit card debt. And this is a problem across the board because nobody's responsible. Nobody. It's spend, and then spend some more, and who cares where any of it comes from? It just doesn't matter anymore. And Americans ought to be up in arms over it, but they're not. Most of them, at least, because they just want free stuff. It doesn't matter to them when the bill comes due, because they don't care about the bill. Just kick it down the road forever, screw over your grandchildren. It just doesn't matter, so long as people get free stuff now. Like I said, it's why we're having so many problems, because nobody wants to be responsible. And I don't want to turn this into a bash the left video because, let's be honest, both sides are extremely guilty of working off of their emotions. They take their emotional views, they staple them to their foreheads, and then they run around demanding that everyone cater to them. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the identity politics of the left or the religious politics of the right. Neither side has the slightest interest in stepping back and examining their positions critically and rationally. It's all feelings, no facts. All emotions and no intellect. We want people to make us feel good, even if our demands are asinine, and it just doesn't work that way. It can't work that way. It's why our nation is in a death spiral, because so many people don't care that their beliefs are leading us to catastrophe. Everyone is calling the opposition names as though that actually solves anything. And you can't reason with anyone because no one wants to think. I have no idea how to fix this because apparently nobody wants it fixed. And I might as well address the whole tradition thing that a lot of people think that conservatism is based on. We don't follow traditions because they're traditions. We don't stick to things from the past just because they're from the past. We stick with things that have worked in the past until better things come along. Things that demonstrably work better. I get so sick and tired of people going, "Oh, well, you're just living in the past." No, I'm sticking with things that we know work rather than just running willy-nilly around pretending that we ought to try every new idea that comes down the pike. No, this works. It works well. When you come up with something that works better, I will adopt it, but not until. Sorry, I know I'm just ranting now, but it gets really frustrating when virtually every discussion ends in disaster because people are incapable, or at the very least disinterested, in actually thinking about their beliefs. You can point out all their problems, and they don't care. They have to be right because they believe it. They don't believe it because it's right. Because to them, whether or not it's right or wrong is entirely irrelevant. Whether or not it demonstrably works, that means nothing. Whether or not it's consistent or logical or rational, they don't care. Nobody seems to anymore, and that's a problem. I'm a conservative because I am convinced that conservative values, the values that I hold, work in the real world. They might not make you happy, but they work. But no one, even other so-called conservatives, actually want to put that to the test because it actually requires work and sacrifice, and that's just not kosher in the modern world. That doesn't stop me from being a conservative, though. It just means that I'm in an increasingly small pool of people that I think actually follow the tenets of conservatism as I see them. That doesn't make me a moderate. It just makes me lonely. And that's really unfortunate.